This is the Miller Report with Suzanne Miller on the Red Apple Podcast Network. And now, here's Suzanne Miller.
Today's guest is a member of Congress representing New York's 17th District. He was elected to office in 2023 and flipped the seat from Democrat to Republican. He was the first Republican to win the seat since 1981. I want to welcome Michael Lawler to the Miller Report. Thank you so much, Michael. Sorry that we're not going to put video on everybody. I have COVID and I don't look so good. So you got to bear with this audio. But thank you, Mike. Thanks for coming on the Miller Report, and I really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me, and I hope you feel better.
Thank you. First of all, before I begin, I want to congratulate you on your second child. Rumor has it you had another baby, so you're a little busy.
We did about 8 days before the election, so, in the department of good timing.
I've been really watching you for a while, and it's my privilege to talk to you. I know you're a good friend of Sid's. He's a big fan. And the whole station, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Mike, this was a huge win. It was fantastic. Tell us what campaign issues you focused on that got you this win.
Oh, well, specifically, we focused on the cost of living and the quality of life, from the crime crisis to the migrant crisis. Obviously, the out of control high taxes in New York and reckless spending that gave us record inflation, drove up the cost of goods, groceries, services, housing. We really zeroed in on that issue, as well as obviously the border crisis and how to address that, and the international crises around the globe. And, issues like anti-Semitism. I represent one of the largest Jewish constituencies in the country. In my district. And so, these are issues that are of great importance to folks.
Well, we're going to get into all of that. As you know, I'm also a big fan of yours, particularly for that reason being that I have a background that my parents are Holocaust survivors, so I do speak out a lot about this. Tell us how you managed to not get the migrants in Rockland County.
Well, we took immediate action when Mayor Adams was trying to send migrants out of New York City and into other municipalities across the state, municipalities he has no jurisdiction over whatsoever. We filed action. My town supervisor in the town that I live in, Teresa Kenny, town of Orangetown, went to court along with our county executive, Ed Day. And they really fought back against what the mayor was trying to do. They used the town code and the fact that you could not have transient stays more than 30 days. And meanwhile, the city was trying to enter into 4-month contracts with the hotel. And they were successful in court. And, it certainly was a model for other parts of the state, but it really put the pressure back on Mayor Adams. New York City chooses to be a sanctuary city. New York City chooses to have the right to shelter policy. New York City chooses to spend billions of dollars of taxpayer money to provide free housing, clothing, food, education, and healthcare to illegal immigrants. We rightfully pushed back against that.
Did you watch Trump's the address to Congress last night with all his lists?
I did. I was sitting in the chamber, and certainly the president laid out, his vision and what he's looking to do to address the challenges facing the country, from the affordability crisis to the border crisis. Border crossings are down to just over 8,000 for the month of February. A year ago, under Joe Biden, it was at 189,000 border crossings for the month of February. So significant movement there. Obviously, the international crises around the globe, bringing the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the war that has ensued to an end. Obviously, getting our hostages out of Gaza and continuing to support Israel, taking on China and the unfair trade practices, including with allies like Canada and Mexico.
Let's just stay on last night. Do you believe the difference in the room? I mean, I thought Trump was great when he was trying to engage them to at least acknowledge something that he has done. What was the feeling in the room between the left and the right? It was so in your face that they were sad people and happy people. What was the feeling in the room?
Frankly, my Democratic colleagues were an embarrassment. They didn't applaud for the first lady when she came in. They didn't applaud for the cabinet members. They
Wow.
didn't applaud for the president. They wouldn't send their leadership to be part of the escort committee, which is, something that occurs in every joint session. Members escorting the president or a foreign leader into the chamber to speak. It's unheard of not to do that. And then throughout the speech, refusing to stand and applaud for
Right.
bipartisan issues, for issues that matter to the people, issues that determine the outcome of control of Congress and the election. And then, even worse, not standing and applauding for a 13-year-old boy, dealing with cancer, not standing and applauding for the mother of children that were killed by illegal immigrants, not standing and applauding for an American that was released. He was held hostage by Russia, not standing and applauding for the widow of a slain police officer. This is what they have become. I mean, it just completely unhinged about President Trump to the point where they can't even stand and applaud average American citizens who have been impacted by crime or are doing good in our community or have fallen victim to illegal immigrants, and they don't care. I mean, they just sat there, stone-faced, wouldn't applaud, wouldn't acknowledge.
Did you see
Uh,
Nancy Pelosi's face?
it was shameful. It really was. The whole thing was shameful. I've never seen anything like it.
And it was just so blatant how divided we are. But what is surprising to me is Michael Johnson. I know that you were a proponent for Kevin McCarthy, but nobody expected Michael Johnson to be a success. What do you think he's done to do that, to unite the party?
Look, I mean, Speaker Johnson inherited a very difficult situation, and I think he has worked tirelessly to bridge the divides within the conference to keep us in the majority and to show that we can govern. And I think, obviously, with President Trump in office now and Republicans controlling the Senate, it's critically important that everybody work together to address the challenges facing the country. And I think Speaker Johnson is doing that, and he's continuing to lead and lead in a productive way to address so many of these issues.
So now that the Republicans control everything, what are your thoughts on eliminating the debt ceiling?
Look, I think the debt ceiling itself is somewhat pointless. The fact is, this is about previous debts incurred. You've already incurred the debt. You have to pay it. If you don't pay it, you default. Anybody who doesn't pay their credit card bill is going to default. So the fact is, the debt ceiling itself is not the issue. If you want to rein in our debt, if you want to reduce deficit spending, that is a function of the appropriations process. That is a function of budgeting. But the debt ceiling, to me, is frankly a political tool by which the minority tries to exert maximum pressure on the majority, and I just think it's foolish. And it
Do you
doesn't
think it's a
really serve
political
purpose.
thing? You don't think
It's political. It doesn't really serve a purpose.
What about the tariffs? How do you think that's going to affect our economy?
Look, I think in the immediate, the tariffs are a good tool by which to force fair trade. It's a good tool by which to force behavioral change among some of our allies. President Trump is obviously very focused on border security, illegal immigrants crossing over, fentanyl, the deadly flow of fentanyl into our country, killing tens of thousands of Americans. And he wants greater cooperation from Mexico and Canada on those issues. And, I think when you look at other countries, we have allies who, frankly, don't allow American products into their country or put significant barriers and restrictions in place, put tariffs in place, put price controls in place. You look at prescription medication, for instance, in Europe. The Europeans put significant price controls on that, and that causes prices to rise here in the U.S. We're subsidizing that. So the president is seeking to get fair trade practices for all of my colleagues that are continually saying we need free trade. Well, it's not free trade if you have other countries putting significant barriers in place on U.S. products.
But we still have to look at the middle class, and I don't think there was anything said about fixing that. Do you agree?
No, I think
Lowering prices.
No, he talked extensively about the tax cuts. He talked extensively about energy production. Energy is critical to reducing the cost of goods, manufacturing, transportation.
Mhm.
When you talk about the tax cuts that we are looking at, he's talking about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. That directly impacts the middle class. Lifting the cap on salt will provide immediate tax relief to hardworking, New Yorkers and middle class families all across this country. So, I think absolutely we talked extensively about that. We also talked about reducing inflation, and in order to do that, you have to reduce the size and scope of the federal government and cut back on the excessive spending.
So you think this is just going to be a short time and then we're going to bounce right back and we have to suck it up, is what you're saying. And what he's saying.
Well, he inherited a mess from Joe
Right.
Biden, and obviously this is not all going to be fixed in one
Right.
night. And we're only 43 days into his administration. So, I think obviously a number of things are in effect, and we're making progress on critical legislation that's going to help reduce the cost of living and jumpstart the economy.
Let's move on to foreign affairs, Michael. I know that you were assigned to be on the Committee of Foreign Affairs. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know one of the things you're going to focus on is the Middle East, and you have I think you have a great anti-Semitism bill right now in the House. Is that true?
I have a bill, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, that's focused on, enshrining into federal statute the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism and all of its contemporary examples for the purpose of Title VI enforcement for violations of the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Or you got to dumb it down for my audience. We got 6 million people listening. They want to hear
So
this.
the objective is to define anti-Semitism and force the Department of Education to enforce violations of folks' civil rights. What we saw with these anti-Semitic protests on campuses and colleges and universities is that the universities really don't know how to define anti-Semitism and don't enforce Title VI, and really are not protecting these students from harassment and violence and anti-Semitic hate crimes. And so this is about really strengthening and enforcing the law and cracking down on these violent and anti-Semitic protests.
So do you think it's going to get passed?
We passed it through the House last year, 320 to 91. Chuck Schumer, the highest-ranking Jewish official in American history, failed.
I'm appalled.
He's a shanda.
I'm appalled.
He's a disgrace. He failed to bring this bill to the floor because he didn't want to offend Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and divide the Democratic conference in the Senate. And so he let the bill languish for 8 months. And now he has the chutzpah to write a book about combating anti-Semitism. But the one thing he actually could have done to do that, he failed to do.
So where are we now with it?
We reintroduced it a few weeks ago. We are working through the legislative process to get this through the Judiciary Committee and onto the House floor for a vote. And I have a great confidence that when it does make it to the floor for a vote, it will pass overwhelmingly. We'll get it through the Senate this time because Senator Thune will put it on the floor for a vote, and President Trump will sign it into law.
Mike, can you explain to my audience how anybody could be Jewish and not be so thankful we have Trump right now?
Well, look, I'm Irish, Italian, Catholic, and certainly represent one of the largest Jewish constituencies in the country. And I know that within my own district, I mean, the Jewish vote moved to the right. President Trump did very well. I won the Jewish vote overwhelmingly in my district. And I think there's no question that because of the anti-Semitism that we have seen primarily within the Democratic Party and within the far left of the Democratic Party, there are a lot of people that have shifted rightward on this issue alone, as well as obviously the issue of supporting Israel. And I think that's going to continue. I think people are disgusted by what they've seen and continue to see from within the Democratic Party.
So I had Bruce Blakeman on a few weeks ago, and we talked about the masks being banned in his county. Is there anything in your bill allowing people that are protesting to at least take their masks off so we can see who they are and see if they're citizens or they're even students in these schools?
Well, like that's a state and local issue. I support what Bruce did. I think wearing masks in public, but for a health reason, should be banned. We banned it for years for a reason. You don't want people utilizing masks to commit violent crimes. Obviously, anybody can break the law, and many of these folks do. But the objective is to really ensure the safety and well-being. And if people are going to engage in violence of any kind, they should be identified and they should be held accountable.
So where are we on that here with the students? Is there any progress?
Well, I think this is an issue at the state level that they need to address and reinstate the old law.
So it's not being done. Now, what about the students that are here that are not even students or that are violent? Are they being deported?
Well, President Trump put in place an executive order that any student here on a visa that engages in these violent protests, their visa will be revoked and they will be deported, and they should be. You are not entitled to be here. This is a privilege, and you're being granted an opportunity to come here to learn, to participate in our country and our society. And if you're going to engage in anti-Semitic protests, we don't need you here. We don't want you here. So they will be deported.
Let's move on to Gaza. So what are your thoughts about the Trump Riviera or the new Egypt proposal? Are you watching that?
Well, as chair of the Middle East subcommittee, obviously I'm paying attention very closely to
Tell us.
the conversations. Look, I think President Trump has a very unique way of forcing a conversation. And I think obviously our Arab partners and allies in the region, really need to focus in on what can be done to address the challenges here in Gaza and the West Bank, and how best to bring about peace and stability long term. And they need to take a leading role in this. And I think that's really been the president's point. And I think obviously, these conversations are going to be ongoing. The Egyptian plan that came out, the administration already said needs a lot more work, and so certainly, I think this is the beginning of a necessary and long conversation.
What can you just tell us, if you were, being that you are on the committee, what would you suggest?
Well, look, it has to be an Arab-led solution. I think there needs to be an Arab-led consortium to help with the funding and the rebuilding. The U.S. and Israel certainly can support that as it gets finalized. But I think there's no question there's going to have to be significant investment in the region to rebuild. I think there has to be great consideration, obviously, about how you go about that, and where people are living in the immediate and in the interim. And of course, obviously, very clearly, Hamas cannot remain in power. So there's a lot of work ahead. This is the beginning of the dialogue, but
what do you think? Where do you think the Palestinian people should go during this time? No matter who rebuilds it, everybody agrees we need to rebuild it and we need to make a change, because nothing has changed in all these years. And I think whatever, at least Donald Trump is on something, on a voyage to make a change and make it for the better. No matter who invests in it, we need to make a change. And capitalism always helps in fighting, so people will not be so desperate. But what happens to the people that are there? What do you suggest?
Look, I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds on this. I think obviously this is part of the consideration and discussion. You have to recognize for some of our Arab partners, it's not so easy to just take on, refugees and obviously, some of the challenges that are associated with the current leadership of Gaza. So, this is going to be a very important discussion, but I think it's premature to get ahead of it.
It's funny. I'm talking to you, and I feel like Trump last night didn't spend much time on it because he doesn't want people to know his plan. And that's okay if you also know there's a plan. But tell our audience there is a plan.
Well, I think, look, the president has spent a lot of time talking about the Middle East. He's had his special envoy there extensively, obviously negotiating with with respect to the hostages being released. So obviously there's only so much you can cover in one speech, and I think certainly he has spent a significant amount of time addressing the issue of the Middle East and the current situation. So it didn't bother me that it wasn't a main focal point. I think he wanted to spend a lot of time on domestic politics, understandably.
Well, he said before he took office, he'll never tell anybody his plan. But let's go back to the hostages, Michael. Do you think that it's fair that we trade dead bodies for hundreds of murderers? Like, what is that about? Like, what do you suggest there?
Look, anytime you're negotiating, these types of deals, it's difficult. You're negotiating with people who have no regard for human life. You're negotiating with people who murdered babies and without even giving it a second thought. And, obviously it's extremely complicated. You want to bring all of the hostages home. I've met with every one of these hostage families.
Wow.
They want their loved ones home. And I fully support that and understand where they're coming from. And so obviously when you're dealing with a hostage negotiation, it complicates things. And obviously, if Hamas did not have hostages, I think we'd be having a very different conversation today. Frankly, I think this conflict would have been long over. It's obviously it's a very difficult negotiation.
I mean, you do recall what happened with Sinwar. I interviewed 7 of the doctors that were in Gaza during that time. And I have to tell you, we saw him in prison. An Israeli doctor helped him, operated on him, and then he went and killed their family. So we're letting these people out and they're going to come back and kill us. There's got to be a better plan.
Look, it is obviously it's extremely difficult. We want this conflict to come to an end. We want Hamas defeated and the threat against Israel ended, and we want the hostages home. So I know the president and his team continue to work towards a resolution and getting the hostages out.
So let's just talk for a minute about the Abraham Accords. I know that Trump mentioned it last night. Do you think that's going to happen? And tell our audience what you think about it and what it is.
Well, look, I led the effort to get the special envoy for the Abraham Accords passed and signed into law last Congress to create an ambassador, ranked position. And certainly, that obviously is extremely important. I think the Abraham Accords are critical to long-term peace and stability in the Middle East. And, ultimately getting Saudi Arabia to the table and normalizing relations with Israel is vital for the future.
You think it will happen?
Yeah, of course.
That's great. So lastly, let's switch to local politics. I know while your district is Rockland County, north of the city, your constituents are impacted by New York City politics. So what are your thoughts of the mayor race?
Look, New York City, unfortunately, under Bill de Blasio and Eric Adams has devolved. It's just the quality of life has dropped. The cost of living has skyrocketed. Businesses shutting down, people leaving the city in droves. There are real challenges facing the city. And once again, New York City is on the Democratic side left with terrible choices. The one progressive, radical socialist after the next. And of course, Andrew Cuomo seeking to make a comeback, and yet, doesn't seem to want to acknowledge a simple fact. He's the one who signed cashless bail into law. He's the one who signed congestion pricing into law. He's the one who made New York a sanctuary state. Many of the challenges New York City is facing right now, he had a hand in.
But he also,
if you acknowledge it or not.
If you heard his speech when he announced, he did say that he had made some mistakes and he didn't realize the gravity of these things at the
Yeah, well,
time. It was a different
these are
time.
pretty big mistakes that were made.
Well, I mean, you're not endorsing him.
No, no.
Who are you endorsing?
Look, this process is obviously playing out right now. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks and months. I just fundamentally believe that New York City deserves better than what we're seeing out of the last two mayors. They've been a complete disaster. They've reversed so many gains that were made over 20 years prior, and it's unfortunate. It really is. It's the greatest city in the world, and yet it is being subjected to terrible leadership.
What about Curtis? He's our only Republican at the time. What do you think?
Yeah, look, if Curtis is the Republican nominee, I certainly will support him. I think, this we need strong leadership, and I think looking at what is being presented by the Democratic side, it's a disaster for New York.
So it'll end up being Curtis versus Cuomo. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, assuming that's the race, I mean, that's certainly going to be a battle royale, and obviously those two know each other quite well, going back probably 40 years. So that'll be quite the debate.
Do you think that there's a chance that Adams will switch to the Republican side?
No.
No. Okay. Well, I hope everybody hears that. Is it true? There's a rumor that you might be running for governor. Is that true?
We're looking at it. We'll see, as this unfolds over the coming months. But we're taking a look. The bottom line is New York needs balance and common sense. And Kathy Hochul is the most inept, feckless governor in America. And she's been a complete disaster. We lead the nation in outmigration, have the highest tax burden, the worst business climate. Our quality of life has dropped precipitously. There are real challenges facing New York, and we need common sense.
So, Michael, if you were running for governor, and you won, what would be the first thing you would change?
Oh, look, I would immediately move to allow for natural gas in New York, reverse some of the disastrous policies, the CLCPA, cashless bail, congestion pricing, and really work to cut taxes and rein in the size and scope of New York State. Kathy Hochul is proposing a $252 billion budget, up $100 billion in just one decade. It's unsustainable.
It's funny.
New York is bleeding its tax base.
I was talking to a couple of friends of mine out east this weekend, and there was like 10 people in the room, and not one of those 10 people were registered to vote in New York because of the taxes. So How do you fix that? How do you fix that the people that even are commuting are not paying taxes in New York and will not vote?
You need to cut taxes across the board. You need to slash business regulations. You need to rein in spending. And you need to have a vision for how to, get Wall Street to come back, build housing, build infrastructure, bring manufacturing back to the state. It requires having a coherent energy policy that reduces the cost of energy, increases reliability. These are all things that matter, and they go hand in glove. You see how other states, their economies have exploded, their populations have exploded. It's not because of the weather. It's because of the cost of living and the cost of doing business and the quality of life.
Those are mostly Republican states, sorry to tell you.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunately for New York, one-party Democratic rule has been a disaster.
I think we need a centrist. We need common sense. We need John Catsimatidis.
John's terrific. I love John.
Anyway, I really appreciate this. I think I've covered everything. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show and certainly discuss the issues impacting New York and the country.
Yes, and I think that New York does represent the finest city in the world, and we have to keep New York safe and vibrant because New York is America, as far as I'm concerned.
No question.
So never bet against New York. And I love talking to you, and we'll get this viral, and I hope to be in touch. Thank you again.
Yep. Thank you.